There are moments in life when a person steps into your world and the whole idea of coincidence just stops making sense. You can try to pick the timeline apart, line up every detail, and search for the logical explanation of how it all came together. But somewhere underneath all that reasoning, you already know that logic was never really running the show. This person didn't just wander into your life by chance. They arrived with a kind of certainty that's hard to put into words. And in that arrival, something inside you shifted, quietly, but in a way that stuck. Even now, as you try to keep moving, as you tell yourself the chapter is closed, as you talk yourself through the reasons the two of you aren't together anymore, there's still something pulling your attention back toward them. It isn't desperation doing the pulling, it's recognition. And if you're reading this right now, it isn't by accident either. The moments that matter most tend to find us exactly when we're finally ready to understand them. There's an old idea that keeps circling back through the wisdom of people who studied the mind deeply. The person who only looks outward is dreaming, and the person who dares to look inward finally starts to wake up. Right now, something inside you is starting to stir. It's a kind of inner knowing that refuses to stay quiet, a feeling that this connection was never supposed to just fade out of your memory without leaving a mark. You might feel like you're standing at some kind of emotional fork in the road, torn in two directions at once, caught between holding on and letting go, between trusting what you feel and second-guessing everything you see in front of you. Silence has a way of making uncertainty grow. Distance can make even the strongest feelings start to doubt themselves. You've probably wondered more than once whether you built up something in your head that was never really there, whether the depth of what you felt was something you invented rather than something real. But here's the thing. If it were only in your imagination, it wouldn't still be alive after all this time. Illusions don't hold up under pressure. Whatever isn't real eventually wears thin and disappears, and yet this hasn't disappeared. It's still here, and because it's still here, some deeper part of you refuses to let it go. Time hasn't worn it down. Pain hasn't erased it. Distance hasn't set you free from it. If anything, every attempt you've made to walk away has quietly led you right back to the same understanding. This person matters. Not because of some passing emotional reaction, but because something far deeper inside you recognizes it as true. This isn't obsession. Obsession is loud, restless, constantly demanding something from you. What you're feeling is quieter than that. It lives underneath your thoughts, underneath your fear, underneath whatever expectations you've tried to set for yourself. It shows up in the still moments, in your dreams, in sudden waves of emotion that catch you off guard for no obvious reason. It feels like something that never got to finish, something meaningful that hasn't fully said what it needed to say yet. Think back to when you first crossed paths with this person. Something old and familiar inside you responded, almost instantly. It wasn't just attraction. It wasn't simply a good match on paper. It felt like recognizing someone you'd somehow known before, even though this was supposedly the first time your paths had crossed. The conversation itself might have seemed completely ordinary, but the energy underneath it wasn't ordinary at all. Something in you registered both intensity and safety at the exact same moment, which is a rare combination, and it's exactly the kind of thing that leaves a lasting imprint on a person. There's a well-known observation that meeting another person is a bit like mixing two substances together chemically. If there's a real reaction, both substances end up changed by it. That's exactly what happened to you. And whether it shows on the outside or not, they were changed too. Connections that genuinely alter something inside us are never casual, never meaningless. They rearrange things internally. They open doors that don't fully shut again, no matter how much time passes. Even now, even through the silence, even across whatever distance sits between you, there's still a thread of connection running quietly underneath the surface. Not everyone processes emotion the same way. Some people show what they feel on the outside, others carry it all internally instead. Silence doesn't always mean someone has stopped feeling. Sometimes it just means the feeling is too big for them to put into words. You woke something up in this person that they weren't prepared to carry, and instead of leaning into it, they pulled back from it. They probably believed that putting distance between you would quiet whatever they were feeling, but energy doesn't just vanish because someone chooses to ignore it. In their quiet moments, when the distractions of the day fade out, thoughts of you still rise to the surface. Not because they're deliberately choosing to think about you, but because the connection surfaces on its own. They remember the conversations you had. They remember what it felt like to actually be seen by someone. They notice the gap between how it felt being around you and how flat everything else feels in comparison. And that contrast creates real discomfort inside them, not because they don't care about you, but precisely because they do. Inside them, there's an internal tug-of-war going on, old emotional wounds, a fear of being vulnerable, a fear of losing control, a fear of being exposed in ways they don't feel ready to handle. For some people, love simply doesn't feel safe, not because of anything the other person did, but because of what love stirs up inside them personally. This is exactly where a lot of strong connections start to get complicated. One person begins to wake up emotionally while the other resists what's being reflected back at them. You became something like a mirror for this person. You reflected feelings they hadn't fully worked through yet, and instead of facing what that mirror was showing them, they stepped back from it instead. There's a well-known saying that until something unconscious becomes conscious, it will quietly steer your life while you go on calling it fate. Right now, they're still being shaped by things they haven't confronted yet. But once real awareness starts, it can't be undone. What's been seen can't be unseen. What's been felt can't be unfelt. You walked into their life and woke up an emotional honesty, a softness, an authenticity in them that had been sitting dormant for a long time. That kind of impact doesn't just fade away quickly. It lingers, and it slowly reshapes how a person sees things over time. Life doesn't put people in each other's paths for absolutely no reason. If this connection was meant to end without leaving any real meaning behind, it would have simply ended quietly, without an echo. Instead, it keeps showing up in unexpected ways, in dreams that feel more vivid than being awake, in sudden thoughts of each other that arrive completely uninvited. These aren't just random distractions. They're reminders that something is still unfolding beneath the surface, even if it's not visible yet. There's a real difference between forcing an outcome and trusting the timing of things. Your exhaustion makes complete sense. Loving someone deeply without any clarity is emotionally exhausting work. But hope isn't weakness. Hope is often just intuition wearing a different name, and intuition doesn't force anything. It simply stays present, quietly waiting. Something is shifting right now, even if you can't fully see it yet. Whatever resistance has been there is slowly starting to soften. Emotional walls that once felt solid are beginning to loosen. What used to feel completely closed off is starting to open up little by little, and the idea of losing you completely is starting to weigh more heavily on them than the fear of finally stepping forward. This isn't the end of the story. It's more like a pause, a space where understanding is quietly forming. You're not being asked to sit around in emptiness waiting. You're being asked to stay grounded in yourself, to remain open without losing your own footing in the process. Real patience isn't passive waiting around. It's steady trust that doesn't require you to abandon yourself along the way. As all of this settles inside you, pay attention to whatever feels true without you having to force it. Truth doesn't need pressure to be believed. It just feels clear the moment it arrives. And if what you're feeling now is calm instead of anxiety, that calm is your own clarity speaking to you. This connection isn't breaking apart. It's simply changing shape. And in that process of change, both of you are being reshaped in the process. The mind tends to struggle with uncertainty because it wants clear definitions and neat timelines. But deeper awareness doesn't operate on that kind of schedule. Real growth tends to happen in unclear, murky territory. It strips away illusions, expectations, and emotional dependencies until only the truth is left standing. What you're going through right now isn't just waiting around. It's becoming something. Ever since this connection entered your life, you're simply not the same person you were before. Your emotional awareness has expanded. Your standards have shifted. You can no longer settle easily for shallow connection or inconsistent presence from another person. Something inside you is now actively seeking alignment, honesty, and emotional clarity. That isn't a coincidence. It's the lasting imprint of a genuinely deep emotional encounter. Sometimes a connection doesn't show up in your life to stay right away. Sometimes it arrives first to wake up your awareness, to show you exactly what your heart is capable of feeling and what it simply can't ignore anymore. Once that awareness gets switched on, there's no going back to who you were before it happened. Even if the person isn't physically present in your life anymore, that inner truth stays active regardless. This is exactly why letting go feels so hard. It's not just an attachment to a person. It's an attachment to a truth about yourself that got revealed through knowing them. You discovered how deep your emotional capacity actually runs. You discovered your own capacity for presence, connection, and devotion. And once you've experienced that kind of expansion, there's no reversing it. Your mind might question it from time to time, wondering why it doesn't feel easier or more logical. But connections like this one don't move in a straight line. They move in cycles, circling back to the same emotional themes, but a little deeper each time around. What makes this whole situation complicated isn't a lack of feeling, it's timing. You're emotionally open right now. They're still working through internal fears and experiences they haven't fully resolved yet. Readiness isn't something that can be handed from one person to another. It has to be built internally through actual experience and honest self-confrontation. There are moments when they come close to reaching out to you, moments when your name crosses their mind unexpectedly, moments when they're holding their phone, unsure of what to even say, and fear interrupts before they can act. Fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, fear of being emotionally exposed. So they pause instead, hoping that time alone will resolve something that really only courage can resolve, and yet time keeps quietly bringing you back into their awareness anyway, because emotional bonds that haven't been resolved don't just disappear on their own. They resurface the moment distractions fade away. Late at night, early in the morning, in those quiet spaces where thoughts can't be avoided, you become a presence they simply can't fully ignore. You might also start noticing certain signs showing up more often. Not to confuse you, but to steady your trust in your own perception of things. A song, a dream, a sudden memory that feels emotionally sharp and clear. These aren't meant to pull you backward. They're meant to remind you that your inner knowing isn't false. A subtle shift is happening inside you. You're learning the difference between attachment and alignment. Attachment tells you that you need this person in order to feel whole. Alignment tells you that you're already whole, and that whatever truly belongs to you will meet you honestly, in truth. That shift changes everything. The moment you stop chasing clarity and start actually embodying it, the whole dynamic naturally starts to change too. Emotional pressure eases off. Your presence becomes stronger. And in that kind of state, a genuine connection becomes far more possible than it was before. Emotional healing comes from self-worth, letting go of control, trusting the process, and allowing authentic love to develop naturally rather than through fear, chasing, or dependence. The more grounded you stay in your own truth, the clearer everything else becomes. Whether this path eventually leads back to each other or leads to release, it won't destroy you either way. It will strengthen you instead. And there's something inside you that already understands this connection is carrying unfinished meaning, not because it's meant to trap you in some repeating loop, but because it's meant to bring the truth out into the open. Words that were never spoken, feelings that were never fully expressed, choices that got delayed out of fear. None of that simply disappears on its own. It stays present until it finally gets acknowledged. Fear sits quietly at the center of this connection, quietly asking to be seen. Your fear has been about learning to trust your intuition without losing yourself along the way. Their fear has been about opening their heart without feeling like they're losing control. Both of these lessons are unfolding at their own individual pace. You might start to notice that even the idea of reuniting doesn't feel the same as it used to. Not because you care any less, but because your standards have evolved past where they used to be. You now value depth over fantasy. You're no longer willing to accept confusion dressed up as fate. You want clarity, presence, consistency, and real effort from another person. This isn't pushing anyone away. This is calling them into truth. A lot of people misunderstand deep soul-level connections because they assume they're meant to be endured through suffering. But genuine connections don't exist to trap you inside pain. They exist to bring you back to yourself first, and only after that, if it's meant to be, to bring both people together in truth. There might be moments where communication opens up unexpectedly. A message that feels honest. A conversation that carries more sincerity than usual. A shift in energy that feels lighter, less heavy than before. Don't rush any of these moments. Let them unfold naturally on their own. Real reconnection can't be forced into happening. And if fear rises up inside you, the fear of hoping again or being disappointed all over again, let it exist without letting it steer you. Fear isn't actually a warning about the future. It's a memory from the past. You're not the same person you were when all of this began. You're more grounded now, more self-aware, and you respect yourself more. You no longer need to prove your worth through waiting around or through sheer endurance. Your worth has already revealed itself through your own growth. Whether they choose to meet you at this level is entirely up to them. But they'll feel the difference in you regardless. The world tends to respond to embodiment, not to longing. And right now, you're embodying something entirely new. Self-respect, emotional stability, and calm trust are becoming your natural state of being. Pay attention to how your body reacts now when you think about them. Less tension, less urgency, more openness. That's alignment. That's your own system, recognizing safety within yourself. Again, what comes next isn't about waiting around passively. It's about allowing life to show you what's real without fighting against it. Allowing love to meet you exactly where you are now, not where you once abandoned yourself for someone else. Allowing this connection to rise into truth, or to dissolve into understanding, without any bitterness attached to it either way. And yet, something inside you still senses that this isn't finished. Not yet, anyway. There's movement happening beneath the surface, courage slowly forming, honesty quietly preparing itself. Stay grounded, stay steady. The next phase of this will require discernment from you, not endurance. You no longer need outside reassurance to believe what you already feel. Something inside you has settled into a quiet trust. At this stage, the connection doesn't feel like an open question anymore. It feels more like a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. They simply reflect exactly where you're standing. You're starting to see clearly that this bond was never meant to be chased down. It was meant to be met halfway. And meeting someone halfway can only happen once both people are genuinely present within themselves first. You're no longer trying to explain your own value or defend your emotions to anyone. You simply know who you are and how you love. This kind of inner grounding changes absolutely everything. Once you stop bending yourself out of shape, trying to keep something alive artificially, the connection either rises into honesty or it reveals its own limitations plainly. Both outcomes are still forms of truth. There's no real loss in truth, only clarity. And now, the space you once filled up with effort looks completely different. Not because your heart has closed off, but because you're simply no longer abandoning yourself to keep someone else close. Your presence has become clearer, calmer, and no longer distorted by fear. And that kind of steady presence tends to bring everything unresolved right up to the surface. Whatever they were avoiding can't stay hidden in the same way anymore. They might start to feel the weight of everything that was never said, the contrast between what could have been and the reality of what's missing now. Responsibility starts to wake up inside them, not guilt exactly, but genuine awareness. Awareness of timing, of choices made, of courage that got delayed for too long. Growth requires letting go of old defenses and finally stepping into vulnerability. This process can't be rushed along. It unfolds at its own pace. And what matters right now isn't speed, it's direction. And the direction is shifting. You might feel moments of emotional closeness even without any actual contact happening. A sense of warmth, calm, or quiet knowing. This is resonance, not imagination. When two people are connected on a deeper level, distance doesn't erase that connection. It only delays how it gets expressed. But that expression is coming, not in chaos, not in confusion, but in clarity. And when that clarity finally arrives, it won't ask you to shrink yourself down to fit it. You're no longer the version of yourself who settles for anything less than the truth. You now understand that love has to actually be lived, not just felt privately. This is exactly why everything slowed down the way it did. Anything built before this level of awareness simply wouldn't have been stable enough to last. If they come back, it won't be out of loneliness or confusion. It'll be intentional, with presence, accountability, and a real willingness to meet you honestly. And if they don't come back, you'll still remain whole, because this connection has already done its deeper work regardless of the outcome. It's already brought you back to yourself, given you a stronger sense of identity, a clearer inner voice, and a more stable emotional foundation to stand on. You now understand the real difference between attachment and alignment, between longing and love, between simply waiting and actually honoring the right timing. This isn't the end of your capacity to love someone. It's a refinement of it. And whatever comes next in your life will meet you at this new level of awareness you've reached. There's a calm confidence building inside you now, a quiet feeling that says you'll be okay either way this turns out. That isn't detachment. That's wholeness. You're no longer negotiating your own worth based on outcomes anymore. You're standing fully in yourself now. Life is expanding again for you. New thoughts, new energy, new clarity are all returning. This isn't a distraction from what happened. It's real movement forward. It's proof that you're no longer stuck cycling through the same emotional loop over and over. You're walking forward with your life again, on your own terms. Love that's actually meant for you doesn't require you to abandon yourself to have it. It recognizes you fully when you're being completely yourself. Something is preparing to resolve itself now, not through force, but through honesty, not through urgency, but through genuine readiness. Stay open, stay grounded, stay clear-headed. The final unfolding of all of this is getting closer, and when it arrives, it will feel more like understanding than shock. There comes a moment when the soul finally stops asking what's going to happen, because it finally understands why everything happened exactly the way it did. You're moving into that space right now, quiet, steady, and deeply aware of yourself. You're no longer clinging tightly to outcomes anymore. You're aligned with the truth instead, and truth moves at its own rhythm. The delays you experienced were never a punishment. They were preparation. If this connection had shown up any earlier than it did, it simply wouldn't have had the strength to survive patterns in both of you that hadn't healed yet. Love needs a certain amount of maturity to exist in any kind of stable form, and you're standing in that maturity now. You're no longer reaching out from a place of emptiness. You're standing from a place of fullness instead. That shift alone changes absolutely everything. Because love that's actually built to last doesn't come from chasing someone down. It comes from resonance, and that resonance is clear now. Silence doesn't feel safe to them anymore. Distance doesn't feel protective to them anymore either. It's starting to feel like loss instead. And loss has a way of waking up courage. Not impulsive, reckless courage, but honest courage. The realization that what the two of you shared was genuinely rare and meaningful is starting to surface for them. If they come back, it will look different this time. And if they don't, you'll still remain whole, because you're no longer the version of yourself who needed someone else in order to feel complete. You've become steady within yourself now, and that's exactly where everything truly changes.